I think being a leader as a coach is difficult, but I think coaching your players to be leaders is far, far, far more difficult. I think that is one of the most difficult things to do in coaching. We don't let little things pass us by, and I think that's part of that hard-nosed culture. We expect perfection.
Hello and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. I am Jonathan Gellner, and thank you so much for being here. This episode is brought to you by baseballcloud. baseballcloud's revolutionary software platform brings to life the numbers captured by TrackMan and FlightScope. This provides colleges, players, and facility owners around the world a turnkey product, allowing them to analyze their data using key metrics and custom visualizations on one intuitive user interface. Go to baseballcloud.com to find out how you can have your own data analytics department for your program. Data has a story to tell, and Baseball Cloud gives it a voice. Today's episode features Matt Denny, the head baseball coach for Mountain Pointe High School in Phoenix, Arizona. In both years at Mountain Pointe, they have made the state tournament, and at the time of this recording, they had 31 home runs in 28 games, leading the state. In a 2-year span at his former stop, Greenway High School, Denny coached his club to a record of 70-7, winning 29 straight games, tying a state record and winning a state championship. His 2014 team earned the Max Preps Medium School rank of number 1 in the country, and Denny was named Arizona Baseball Coaches Association Coach of the Year. A little bit more about Matt. 5 of his former players are currently in professional baseball, including 3 big leaguers. He has served as a longtime coach of Arizona's Sunbelt team, which showcases the state's best talent and sends them to the mecca of baseball heaven in, you guessed it, Oklahoma. He is also a member of the Team USA Baseball Task Force, used to identify and select national team players. Denny played baseball at Phoenix College, South Mountain College, go Cougs, and Grand Canyon University. On the show, Matt walks us through what a typical training session looks like, how and why he has developed a hard-nosed culture in his baseball program, and he also shares with us some different methods that he uses to help players overcome fear and mistakes. You're going to love this one with Matt Denny. Coach Denny, welcome to Ahead of the Curve.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. I listen quite a bit to the podcast and just have some outstanding people on all the time. So I'm honored and humbled to be on. Thank you.
Definitely. Absolutely. And there were several different people that actually told me that I needed to get you on the show. So after you hear it multiple times from different people, then I knew you'd be a perfect guest and a perfect fit. And after talking with you the last couple of weeks about some different things, you're absolutely going to bring it today. So I appreciate you spending some time with us. And I know that during the spring, it's a crazy time for everyone. But thank you again for taking the time to share with us. But for those of our listeners who don't know who you are and want to get to know you a little bit better, do you mind giving us a short snapshot of why you got into coaching and where you're at currently?
Yeah, I'm a Arizona native. I grew up here, played high school baseball locally in Arizona, went on to play at a couple different junior colleges, Phoenix College, South Mountain Community College, and then went on to play at Grand Canyon University. My background, I guess, I didn't have a very strong support system with my parents. And so at a young age, my coaches were father figures or parent figures in a way, not in a disrespectful way to my parents necessarily, but I always felt closer to coaches that were kind of leading me, making the right decisions and just always around the game. I think that when you have an escape and you can get to baseball and you can be around your friends and do things like that, that's really how I fell in love with the game of baseball. And that wasn't necessarily the sport as much as it was the camaraderie and the teamwork and the coaches. And so that kind of is the backbone of my coaching career. I never was the most talented player on a team that I played on, to be honest. I don't remember ever being the most talented player on the team. So I knew that I had to work harder. I knew I had to be a good teammate. I knew I had to do little things to make myself successful. And I've kind of just carried that on to, all the teams that I've coached, and whether they're good teams or bad teams, successful, unsuccessful, I demand those things that I knew that I needed to do. And I think that's been a little bit of the reason why we've had some successful teams. I really believe that.
Oh, I love that, and I think that that I've had two huge influences on my life, just like you have, and Todd Easton and David Smith, and I think most good coaches make their way through or went to South Mountain. Would you agree with that?
I think everyone, yes, every one of them.
That's awesome.
No, that was a great program at the time. Coach Easton was my assistant, was the assistant coach when I was there, and just a great guy, hard-nosed coach. And I played for Coach Lopez, who to this day was the best coach I've played for. He knew when to be serious. He was a player's coach at time. He let players be, freed up and do their thing, which, that's 15, 16, 17 years ago. That wasn't always the case. There was a lot of coaches that were kind of, pigeonholing guys and making them do things their way. And I just saw a different light when I played for him. And yeah, South's a great program with a lot of guys going through there. Tough program.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the fall segment. I always like starting in the off season just to see where you came from, to see where we're at currently in the spring. And so let's start in the fall and, talk to us about your program. What did you guys do this last fall, and what's that look like for you guys? And, let's just walk through a typical week, if that's all right.
Sure. So in the fall, this is my third year at Mountain Pointe High School. I was at a school, Greenway High School, for 14 years before this. And so the last couple falls have really been about trying to get a grasp on what guys can do and what they can't do. And that, I feel like that takes some time to do. So we've done less development the first 2 years than we did this last fall. We will do a lot more of technique stuff. We'll do bunting technique and base running technique to the point where we'll video just our jumps and leads with base running, or we'll video our bunting. And we don't move on really as a program until we can get those things taken care of. And that includes everyone in our program, to make sure that they're going to be able to do the small things for us that are going to help us win in May. And so we don't skip things. We're very intentional about what things need to happen, as far as, like, we have a scoring system for some of our bunts. We have our base running group. You can't move on to anything else that we're doing until you can, do things exactly how we want them to be done. That includes how we take our lead. That includes our stance. That includes, we're very, very detailed with that. We do not play a lot of games in the fall. I just think these guys play a lot of baseball as it is. And I want us to feel like it's Christmas when February comes around, to be honest. So we'll play about 5 or 6 games in the fall and 2 tournaments. Go to Vegas for a tournament and play against some really good competition over there. We're never ready for it, but we go over there just to kind of see where we're at. But to be honest, it's more, the fall is more for player development. We do not do a lot of team defense. We do a lot of individual work with individual defense or individual stuff in the cages. We work through our team series. I know you had Trent Otis on the program. He was a assistant of mine and a hitting coach for the high school Greenway that we talked about. And that has just been huge for us. The team series really gets players individually ready and also the team ready for the spring. So that's probably the biggest area that we spent, or the biggest portion of our time is spent in the team series, grouping guys and being able to get them to see where they're going to be offensively in the spring, so that we can make some adjustments with lineup and things like that.
Okay. And so you're talking about the team series with Trent, and I've seen it, and I've seen how you guys bucket guys, but probably a lot of our listeners haven't. And I know that that's a question that comes up consistently, is we want to individualize as much as possible, but it's not easy to do so. So how have you guys planned around that, and how do you guys put guys into like groups, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So, there's 5 or 6 things that we see that need to happen with a good swing and then need to happen for you to be successful. And so we'll group guys instead of the traditional middle infielders go over here, corner guys go over here, these guys go over here, and you go through your BP groups. We kind of look and say, okay, this guy's struggling with staying in the ground. So also this guy's struggling with staying in the ground. This guy is struggling with whatever the problem is or their vice is, and they'll know. We'll talk about it a lot. We'll say, okay, this is your problem. You're getting away from the things that you're successful with. Let's make sure we stay. For example, guys that are leaking too much, they're pushing forward and they're not staying in the ground and they're not using their legs. So we'll have different groups like that, so other players can be with light groups, and a coach can work certain drills with those types of players, instead of a coach trying to work with this player with staying in the ground, this player with getting around the ball, this player, whatever the, swing problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't always do that. There are times where I'll group guy up. That's, like I said, he's not using his legs. He's not getting in the ground. He's not getting the full, he's not maximizing his swing. So we'll put him with someone that's going good and say, look at the difference. And we'll video the two of them. And we have time in the fall to do this. We'll video the two of them and we'll put them together and say, okay, look at the difference between what you're doing and what he's doing. I think that's been really good for us, preparing us. And like I said, when the spring comes, there's not a lot of swing analysis, if you will, or swing talk. A little bit, sure, but not nearly as much as we do in the fall. It's constant in the fall.
I love that. And that's something that, my head coach and I have been discussing of what we're going to do next fall and how are we going to group guys. And you've got, how many coaches do you have in the fall?
We usually have 3 or 4 out there.
Okay.
For just the varsity, group.
That's awesome.
So we have 2 fields, and we basically split our program into, we have anyone that we think has a chance to play varsity is with us in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the lower group that we just don't see them fitting in right now, that this upcoming spring.
Okay, perfect. And with whenever you break these groups up, are they, I'm just trying to paint a picture for the guys that are listening. And so they're with their group, and do they only stay with their group the entire practice, or do they just
depends.
Okay.
Yeah, it just depends on the day.
Okay.
Like for example, we might have a conditioning group, and so we'll go conditioning group. One, depending on how many guys. Let's just say we have 40 guys out there, and we have groups. We have 5 groups, so we'll have 8 guys in a group, and we might have one group is conditioning, one group is base running, one group is doing individual D, one group is in the cages, and one group is bunting. That's a, I don't like to, we don't go out there and that's what we do every day.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, and I think we'll get to it later, with in the spring and different things like that. I don't want it to be the same every day. I hated that as a player. I hated knowing that I was going to go out to practice. We were going to stretch. We were going to throw. We were going to take ground balls. We were going to hit. We're going to base run. We're going to go home every day,
Mm-hmm.
So I really take a lot of time on trying to switch it up. But as far as those groups, most of the time, yes, they will be with those groups. And when you have 8 in a group, there's probably going to be 2 of those swing things that we talked about within that group.
Okay.
And so when they get to the cage, then they'll break up again. There might be 4 guys that are losing their legs in one group, and then 4 guys that are, hooking balls and not staying on a good line. Those guys will be in the other group, and we'll have 2 coaches down there working with them.
Perfect. I love that. And again, that's I'm jotting down ideas that we can use as well. I'm trying to steal from you, but we use the fall a lot for different competitions and to try and see who is competitive and if that's their nature or if it's not. But are you guys doing something similar? And if you are, how do you guys integrate some competition into your practices?
Yeah, we do. We literally do everything. I'm extremely competitive. I think all good coaches are. Our catch play is competitive. I got a throwing program from Coach Tyler Gillum, who's I respect as much as any coach. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country. Yeah, South Mountain guy. And we meet a lot, talk a lot about, different things and kind of bounce ideas off each other. But he has a throwing program that I've used for about 5 years. I completely stole it from him, barely changed it up, but we keep track of that. So we have competitions before training really even starts with our catch play. Our bunting is always charted in competing, whether or not it's just actual PO or coach writing down scores, or it's just player versus player. The loser, there's always some kind of a consequence for losing, whether it's push-ups or burpees or laps, or a lot of times we will just we'll just do something called Salute the King. I got this from Nathan Choate, who used to be the pitching coach at Grand Canyon.
Okay.
And they throw bullpens, pitcher versus pitcher, almost like a game of horse. And at the end of the bullpen session, the losing pitcher has to get on a knee, look up at the quote unquote king, and salute him. He has to shake his hands. I've added something to that, and I make our guys look the winner in the face and say, "You're better than me today."
Dang.
And when you first start doing this, it's a little bit silly. They think it's funny, kind of, and I don't take lightly to that. I say, no, you're not understanding this. He just beat you. He's better than you. You need to look him in the eye and not be happy about it. And in the back of your mind saying that's never going to happen again. And we kind of use those moments, whether it's, it doesn't matter what the competition is. Our guys hate to salute the king now. Sometimes to the point where I have to calm them down and say, it's a competition. You lost, get better tomorrow. Just try to, so they're not negative emotion, I guess, rather than being competitive is different.
Sure.
We have some competitions when we do base running for our jumps and leads where we have two guys lined up and we have a large construction cone. We put a tennis ball on the top of it and we go on either a whistle or an actual coach's leg lifting up as a pitcher or movement or any kind of thing like that. And we have guys just race to the cone. Usually it's about 15, 20 feet away. So you got to have a good jump. Whoever takes the tennis ball is the winner. And I let them get after it when they do that. I let them get in their face and let them know how slow their opponent was if they won, and kind of really create a talking smack kind of atmosphere when we do that.
Sure.
And then one of the other things that we do is we have what I call a dump it bucket. During BP, our infielders, we take our BP defense very serious. We don't call it shag group. We call it live defense. And our outfielders and infielders are not to be standing around. They're taking every rep very, very seriously. Our infielders are getting out of what we call our circle. For example, if a shortstop is, playing shortstop during BP and there's a line drive to right field, he's obviously not going to get to that ball, but he's to pretend that his pre-pitch and his jump would allow him to get to that. So he takes 4 or 5 hard steps out of the box or out of the circle. Mm-hmm. And then if they do make errors, we have a bucket. It's just a little small plastic classroom type trash can. And I painted on there, dump it on one side, and on the other side it says next play. So if they boot a ball, the whole guys that are watching will yell, dump it. And the guy has to get the ball and jog it over to the dump it bucket, put it in there, and then yell out next play and get back to his position. So It's a way to hold them accountable for defense. But I found that it allows, it kind of prevents the big inning. I've had teams where it's like air, whether it's the same guy or multiple guys, and the damage control is not very good. And I feel like that helps guys just kind of say, you know what, I made a mistake. Here we go. Next play. In 2016, we had a third baseman. Our starting pitcher in the state championship game was our third baseman. So our backup third baseman was there, and he made a really big error in the first inning that cost us a couple runs. And then to end the inning, he made an unbelievable double play to keep us within 2 runs. And it was probably one of the best plays he's ever made. And he came in the dugout and looked at me and said, next play, coach. And it was it was a really cool deal for us. So
that is very cool. And I like those. Those are a little bit out of the box. And I'm always looking for ways that we can do things like that. And, I was talking with Trent and Dave before we got started, just because they know you really well. They know your culture. And one thing that stood out with both of those guys is they talked about you have a hard-nosed culture. And we hear a lot of coaches that are griping about, kids these days or whatever. And, I'm always looking for ways to instill what we want with our players. And I think that they'll follow our lead. But how are you in developing the hard-nosed culture that you want on the field and that you want to see every day?
Yeah, it takes time, man. To be honest, it takes a lot more time than I thought. I had great coaching staff when I was at Greenway and still have a great coaching staff. But a lot of the things that, to have a culture like that, it's not just something that you can talk about and it happens. It's something that has to happen over time. And I struggled with that when I took over at Mountain Pointe, because the culture, not that it was a bad culture at all, but it was just wasn't what I wanted it to be and wasn't what I needed it to be like it was at the previous school. And I was kind of hard on myself saying, why can't we do this? And why can't we do this? And over time I realized, because it does take time, it takes special guys, it takes just great leaders. I think being a leader as a coach is difficult, but I think coaching your players to be leaders is far, far, far more difficult. I think that is one of the most difficult things to do in coaching right now, where you can let your program lead itself. And we weren't there the last couple of years. I think this year we're turning a corner and getting to that position. But as far as the hard-nosed culture, I'm hard on them every day. Like literally every day I'm hard on them. They know that. I'm not negative on them, if that makes sense. I'm just really hard on them. Every single mistake that they make, my coaches and my assistants are instructed to talk about every single mistake. Doesn't matter if you're 4 for 4 in a game with 2 pops and you make a critical error because your pre-pitch wasn't good. We're going to talk about the pre-pitch. Not that we're not going to talk about the offensive day, but we don't let little things pass us by. And I think that's part of that hard-nosed culture. We expect perfection. We also talk every game about mistakes, and we talk about it in front of the group. And I think that's important too. And, instead of pulling a guy aside and saying, hey man, your effort wasn't really good today, we got to do a better job with this. And he's the only one that hears it. You don't really know if those other 17, 18 guys on the team are aware, do they know that you're getting on this guy? So we talk about it in front of the whole group, and we call it dinner talk. It's a family atmosphere. When your brothers and sisters get in trouble, you talk about it at dinner. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do after every single game. We just talk about it, we get it out. And I think it helps people deal with things that they're struggling with. If we have a pitcher that's really doesn't throw a lot of strikes, it's not like we go out there and we're kind of hoping he throws strikes and everyone's wondering if he's going to throw strikes. We say, look, you don't throw strikes. And we say it out loud and we say it to the group. And so those other players can kind of get behind them and rally behind them. So that kind of helps with the culture as well.
Sure. Now, my head coach has been the head coach at Union for a couple of years, let's just say like that. And so he has these different things that he wants to see done every single day. So you talked about little things and things that you're hard on them about. And the more I do this podcast, the more I realize that there are a certain few things that every coach has that they want done every single day. So a couple examples for us would be like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we wear black top. And every Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday or Sunday, whichever one we're practicing on, wear a red top. And just things like that, just attention to details and trying to make sure that these things get done. And you talked a little bit earlier about how you're hard on them and the little things like that. But what are some of those things like that for you, if that makes sense? So what are some things that you are looking for every day? Like being on time, obviously, is a big one for everybody. But what are some of the different things that you look for?
Yeah, being on time is huge. Obviously, we have down our right field line, you enter our field from the right field fence. We have a sign that just says "Do things right," and it's kind of been our mantra this year is D.T.R, which you hear a lot of times in different programs. They're to tap that on their way in, and then they jog from the right field fence all the way to the third base dugout. We don't allow guys to walk on the field at all. That's I think a common thing as well. Our guys wear the same thing for practice. We call it training every day, and that is the only person that gets to wear something different is the winner of BP. And I think we might, talk about that later. But as far as things that we expect, the one thing that I think people that have coached against me or played against me know that our guys get on and off the field as well as anyone. It's really important to me, not just because it shows that you're hustling. It's the foundation. It's the cornerstone of what I believe as a coach. If you make it out and you can sprint to your position, you strike out with the bases loaded, you can sprint to your position. I think it just shows that you're unselfish. I think it shows that you're not worrying about your numbers. I think it shows that you're not caring about anything else except for what our program is asking of us. Is it really a big deal? Not if you really look back at it. No. Why does it really matter? But it's something that we do in our program relentlessly. I tell our guys, I want you running off when you're coming off the field, I want you passing by the other team that's jogging and make them aware that we're ready to hit, or make them aware that we're ready to have a clean 1-2-3 inning. And I think just the way our guys get on and off the field is important. And it's one of those little things that we really mandate in our program.
I like that a lot. And you guys it sounds like you're spending a ton of time with your players, and especially after games, and you guys are getting it all out. But is there anything in particular that you do to get closer to your team or to help bring your team together? Just thinking about personal development with your players?
Yeah, I mean, I constantly have conversations with them about anything and everything. They know that they can come talk to me about anything. Just love on them. You know, we'll push them, and they know that as hard as we are on them, it's because we love them. And there's times where things aren't going our way, and we're all in it together. I think the more I'm around the guys, obviously in the spring, the more you can kind of see players that are having good days and bad days, and just talking to them and kind of having dialogue with them will help. I think it helps the instruction part of it more as well, because they trust you, you know, so they'll listen to you. They know that you're trying to do what's best for them. But I think just them seeing how much time and effort that we spend every day in our training sessions, that's probably the biggest portion of my day, is planning one of our practices or one of our training sessions. Is, you know, I'm up at night and changing things all throughout the day, but we take a lot of pride in that. And I think once kids see how much time we're spending, and we're not just, you know, being what we call high school Harry coaches, just run it out there and take some ground balls, like I mentioned earlier. And
Sure.
It's just not okay with us. We want to coach at a high level, and we expect players to put effort at a high level.
Let me take a few seconds to tell you guys about OnBaseU. OnBase University is an organization that studies how the human body moves in baseball and softball. They offer certification seminars that teach coaches, trainers, and medical professionals how to assess an athlete's physical ability to perform movement patterns that are specific to hitting and pitching. For example, they just put up a blog on their website, onbaseu.com, that discussed why hip internal rotation is important in hitting and how they evaluate it with their OnBaseU screen. If you want to learn more about OnBaseU, I did a podcast with OnBaseU founder Dr. Greg Rose, episode 78, who talked about this and modeled the screen after golf assessments that he created for TPI. They are hosting pitching and hitting seminars in Newark, Houston, and Chicago over the next few months, and I will be attending the one in Houston, and I hope to see you there. No, I think back whenever I was a player, and I guess I just didn't realize how much time that the good coaches that I had spent on practice planning and getting us ready and thinking about just what they need to do to get each of us better. And I took that for granted for sure. And now that I'm a coach, it keeps me up at night at times that I'm thinking, what can I do? What can I do to get this guy where we need him to go? And I you know, for the players listening, that's something that goes through a lot of different coaches' minds. And we talk about being able to turn it on and off. Well, it's not easy. And so we're in the middle of spring now, and you guys, we're both hopefully going to make a playoff run here in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to do our best to do so. But what does a typical week look like for you guys leading up to this point? And you know, I love practice planning, and I love being able to be efficient with it and be fast and to do all of those different things. But you mentioned that you take a lot of time on it. So walk us through what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So we'll do competition pretty much every day, but our weekly plan, we'll usually play 2 or 3 games a week unless we're in a tournament week. But we have typical training day. We'll start with a team meeting at 3:00. We have 7th hour baseball class that we can use to be on the field sometimes, but we never start our training session at that point. I want all of our coaches and all of our players to be in the team meeting. Our team meeting is basically starts off with tomorrow's plan, if we have a game, or what we're going to be doing for the next day. I let our starting pitchers pick uniforms. So we'll say, you know, what's the plan for tomorrow? What uniform? Okay, we got that out of the way. And then we'll kind of just talk about whatever's relevant, whatever's important during that time. Many times we'll use that time to talk about the previous game. I take a lot of pride, and if there's one area that I feel pretty confident on, it's kind of knowing the pulse of the team and what our team needs as far as, do we need a pick-me-up day? Do we need a day where we kind of let them see some failure? And I take a lot of time figuring out where we are with that. And so we kind of discuss that in our team meeting. And then we have a quote every day. Sometimes that's a quote that my thoughts. Many times it's a famous quote or a quote that people haven't heard. And that quote is always geared towards, what should we be thinking about right now? Are we, we're in the middle of a 13-game winning streak right now. So the other day we talked about the pride comes before the fall. And I had all the kids write down, what are 3 things that's going to stop us from our goal or stop us from winning? And I made all the guys write down, text me 3 things. And then I read those things out loud to the group. And I felt like it's a good time to kind of say, look, we weren't going very good early in the spring, and we were having a lot of conversation of what we need to do to get better. Now that we're playing better, let's not forget what things we were struggling with and how quickly that can turn if we are oblivious to those things. So we'll use that time for the quote, and then we will get into our training. I have them read a card before every practice, and it just talks about how they're going to be a hard-nosed practice player. It's a little laminated card, maybe 3 inches by 1 inch, and they all wear them in their hat. They say the same thing. I've used it since I started coaching. And so they'll go on a knee and they'll read that card. Every day they switch players who's going to read it, and then we get started. We do our catch play. Our base running is always done we stretch first. Then our base running is done every day right after stretching. Then we go into catch play, and then straight into our training.
So after catch play, something that I really, really enjoy getting to see is, because everybody's is a little bit different, but what's your BP look like? And you mentioned earlier that you have a BP player of the week, and how do you measure that, or how do you decide who gets that?
Yeah, so we have. I started doing this about 10 years ago. I cannot remember who I got it from, but they basically chart their BP, and I've always thought that BP sometimes is just used to grip it and rip it and, get after it. Even when you're doing a hit and run round, there's those players that kind of, hit and run 3 of them, and then I'll get after 2 of them and not really focus on the job or whatever the execution is. Mm-hmm. So I have an Excel sheet that basically, I shared this at the high school national convention a couple of years ago, but basically it has all the situations that I think we need to work on. So it has some bunting, it'll have drag, it'll have sack, it'll have safety squeeze, suicide squeeze. And then there's everything you can think of with hit and run, move them, score them, slash, opposite field, move them, oppo taco, mm-hmm. Screen, the L screen, and they're all different kinds of categories. And during our BP session, our guys will try to execute whatever the rounds are for that day. Okay. There's also some straight rounds on there. But they have a coach is charting these rounds of BP, and usually we go in sets of 5. So if we have hit and run, they sack their first one, they get a point for that. And then they have 5 hit and runs. And if they get 3 out of 5, then we chart that 3 out of 5. And then we count at the end of the day how many points they have, and whoever wins BP that day they're the only one that gets to wear a gold shirt. Everyone else wears the regular maroon, black, or gray practice shirt, and they wear gold the next day.
Nice.
And so they'll take the shirt from somebody, and then the back of the shirt says, "Come and get it." And it's just a way to kind of brag to the other guys, like, this is what we're fighting for. So you want to wear the gold shirt, then you better do a good job. With our bunting, we call it bunt to hit. If they get their sack down, they get all 5 opportunities. If they don't, then they only get 3. So if you don't get your bunts down, you're going to have a really, really difficult time winning, because you're going to get, you're only getting 60% of the opportunities to get it done. While we're doing that, like I said earlier, we don't have shag groups. We have live defense. And so if a guy makes an error, that gets taken away. You get a point taken away. A bad pre-pitch is taken away. I have multiple coaches behind the screen, behind the turtle, that are calling out guys, and they'll just call them out and say, bad pre-pitch, error or whatever, and then they know that they're getting their points taken away. So some guys start off at -2 or -3 before they even grab a bat.
Perfect. And is that so I'm envisioning this. So you've got live defense and you've got a group that is hitting. Do you have base runners, and do you have another group that is hitting somewhere else?
Yeah, we have a cage group usually, and a lot of times we even have another butt group. So we have about 20 guys on a roster. That live defensive group, it's not a live team defensive group. For example, there's not 9 live defenders, and they don't throw, ground balls. We don't throw across to first very often with that. This is live to the ball or live reps. So a center fielder obviously isn't going to go chase down a double in left center. Mm-hmm. He's going to get his 4 or 5 hard steps, and then a PO is going to fill in and shag the rest of the balls that are in the outfield. Okay. Depending on the day, depending on who we're facing and what we think we're going to see in the upcoming game, will determine if we have a bunt station, or, we might have a velocity down the cage, or we might have something soft down the cage, or we kind of prepare them for whatever we think we're going to see. Okay. With that.
Perfect. I love that. And another thing that I wanted to ask you guys about is, so you're tracking your BP. Is there any other things that you guys track besides your BP setting, your live defense, or anything like that throughout the season?
Yeah, in the fall, we'll use a little bit of technology. We'll use a radar gun for exit velocity a little bit, just to kind of see where guys are at. Mm-hmm. I want them taking swings. We're pretty free we're not a team that we're not a traditional work behind a runner, move them, score them type of thing. I give my guys some freedom to try to bang a little bit more than most coaches, I think. Mm-hmm. And so we'll talk a little bit about exit velocity with radar gun, and then we'll use blast motion a little bit. It's hard in a high school setting, especially with us not being out that much in the fall. Like, I would love to have the time to get everyone dialed into blast motion and show them some things. But as far as that's concerned, that's really all the data we kind of use. We do have some things in our cages that prepare us. We have some rope that we, put on good launch angles for different guys. So we have 3 different launch angles in the cage, ropes that represent certain launch angles, I guess. And we'll tell guys, look, you're probably best working on this rope a little lower than, one of our guys who can really bang it. He should be working on a little bit higher line. But we do try to make sure we get the ball in the air and not on the ground, and give them some freedom there. But I think the technology sometimes helps showing them where they are and what lines they should be on.
No doubt. And another thing that consistently came up, and I think you gave a presentation about this, and that's getting your team ready to play in the postseason. Do you mind sharing with us some things that you talked about with that?
Yeah. Some of the things we've kind of already talked about a little bit. I think competition and everything is important. I think the tracking the BP and dump it trash can and all those things are things that are important. But I think that it starts, preparing for the postseason, in my opinion, starts the day you lose your last game the last year. So, for example, this year, whenever we get knocked out, we'll have a conversation. I meet with my seniors alone first, meaning if we have 7 seniors, all seniors I talk to, thank them, tell them, everything that I need to. And, I'm a crier, so I'll be out there crying. I'm sure I cry every year at the end of the year, every year at the banquet, because I'm emotional, and I care so much about players that it's awesome. Hard for me to not show my emotions. So we'll have that conversation. And then I call over the returning players and I say, look, and literally as they're walking away, as the seniors are walking away, I tell our guys, that's what we gotta replace. That's what we have to be better than next year. So we're not in this position where we get knocked out, and we say, how are we going to fill those innings right there? How are we going to substitute middle of the lineup guy right here? How are we going to do this? So I kind of challenge them the second we're done. We obviously take some time off, but that way they can kind of chew on, okay, well, I'm going to try to fill that role, or this guy might be able to try to fill that role. And then we kind of get going in the fall and see who can produce that way. Competition through everything, like we talked about, is really, really big for us. I think we talk a lot in our program about other programs that I think are worthy of state championship contending teams. So we have Hamilton High School in our conference, who's a monster. They've won 1 million state championships. We have Desert Vista just down the road as a rival that are very, very talented. Corona High School is very, very, talented. So we talk about them a lot. I think to the point where sometimes our guys are kind of annoyed with how much I talk about it, but to beat the best, you have to be ready to play the best and play your best at the right time. And so just a lot of dialogue with that. And then, in the weight room, I'll put some competitions together. I'll partner guys up that are around the same strength and give them 2 weeks and say, this is where we need to be. Who's going to win competition at this point, at this point, at this point. We have different checkpoints for that. But I think that one of the biggest things is we talk a lot about fear and pressure. And I think when we're taking ground balls, or let's say we're doing our bunts or whatever it is, things that just seem kind of routine and monotonous, I really tell our guys to put what we call internal pressure on themselves. I want them to take a ground ball and think that they're in a stadium with thousands of people. And if they boot this ground ball, we lose the game. And when you do that and you actually can feel that and believe that and paint that picture, your heart rate kind of speeds up a little bit and you start getting a little bit of that, that juice that you're going to feel in the tournament, and you can handle that better when it comes. Because if you don't do that, all of a sudden this situation is on you in a hurry. Bases loaded, 2 outs, bottom of the 7th inning, we're down a run, facing a guy on the mound. That's what I want them to be thinking about off of the tee. That's what I want them to be thinking about during BP. So sometimes I can see us not doing that, and I'll tell our guys, put some pressure on yourself. Don't just do this lazily, so that when we are at Tempe Diablo Stadium or we are in a spring training facility, that it's not too big of a moment because you've done it 100 times in your head. I think that's a big part of it. And I think Coach Otis brought a presentation in 2014 to our team. We were very, very, very loaded. And our fear was like failure. Our fear was, if we don't win, like this is a failure. And that's a rare thing for a high school team to feel, I guess. But he made a presentation called Fear is a Liar. And it just helped us understand that fear is not an actual thing. It's something that you choose to do. You're choosing to be nervous. You're choosing to be scared. And I think it just helps us deal with that when the time comes, because everyone's going to be nervous. Everyone's going to have a fear of failing, but who handles it better and who's talked about it more and who's in front of it will help in the playoffs.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you hit a little bit of what I was going to ask next, and that's after the season. But what do the summers look like for you? And are you able to have contact with your kids? And just if you could walk us through the 2 months that you guys have, I guess, off from school.
Yeah, we don't have our summer program. I'm not around our summer program a lot. We play about 12 games in June, and they'll play 2 tournaments. And I'm probably at 6 of those games, maybe half of them. And maybe one of the tournaments. I really like to use that time for my assistants to be quote unquote head coaches, because it allows them to build a different relationship instead of coming to me for questions and me disciplining and me coaching over and over. I feel like it gives them a chance to do those things that a head coach would normally do. And I feel like it really helps our assistants, and it helps our players kind of gain a little more respect for assistants as well. I have 3 kids and a wife, and so that's kind of my time to unwind a little bit as well. I'm pretty heavily involved in USA Baseball and our junior Sunbelt team. I coach on the junior Sunbelt team, which is about a 10-day commitment in Oklahoma.
God's country.
And so, yeah, it's a great place, man. McAlester, Oklahoma, I love it. It's fantastic. So I've been on the staff for a number of years, and it's my favorite, besides the spring, obviously, it's my favorite tournament and event. It's just a really cool deal. But that gives me a chance to do those things. And also, we don't have we lift in the summer. We lift all summer, but we don't have any practice or training sessions. Okay. We get to the game 1 hour before. So if we play at 7, we get there at 6, and we stretch for about 15. And then we hit wiffle balls for about 20 minutes. And then we take ground balls for about 15 minutes, and then, throw and get and go. So we use that hour basically as practice before the game starts.
Cool. How many days do you guys lift?
We lift 4 days a week in the summer. Awesome. Right now we lift in the season. We lift 4 days a week. We lift before school. So it just depends on the time of year, but in the fall we go every day. And so summer we go 4, fall every weekday, I should say. And then in the spring we go 4 days.
I love that. So with looking back, and if you could go back and talk to your first year self, or you could talk to some different first year coaches that are listening, what advice would you give yourself, and what advice would you give to them?
Just be consistent. I was really fortunate enough. I got some really good advice. Coach Jerry Dawson was the head coach at Chaparral for years, and I talked to him and a couple other coaches that I respect that are still coaching or just got done coaching, and I think I asked about 7 guys for advice when I first became a head coach, and the only thing that they all said similar was be fair and be consistent. And even though that's not always the easiest choice, making the same decision, whether it's your best player or your worst player, knowing that you have a standard that you're going to hold your players to, and it becomes easier as you know, the longer you get coaching, the longer you're trying to do these things the right way, it becomes a lot easier. Just being very consistent with everything you do and very fair. It's sometimes brutally honest truth. When kids are talking to you about playing time, or parents are talking about playing time, just being able to let them know where you are, because an honest truth, I think, will help, I guess, parents understand that you're doing it for the right reasons. Sure.
I like the clear and concise communication piece as well. And so you're sound like you're a constant learner, and you're talking about how you're changing things a little bit every single day, and you don't want anything to ever stay the same. But if you had to boil something down that you've learned lately that has gotten you really excited, what would that be?
Our batting practice is less feel good. It's less just coach throwing at 50 miles an hour from a certain distance. This season, we're challenging our batting practice a lot more, whether that's a live pitcher, or a lot of times we've been using the machine. We have a junior hack attack machine that we use, and we change speeds, and we have some run to it from lefties or righties, and we mix in some, things that they're not expecting. I've used machines in the past where I'll say, okay, this round's curveball, and you set it up and it throws a curveball, whether it's a really good one or a really bad one. They know it's coming, and that's good. We do a lot of that in the fall. But now in the spring, this year, more than ever, I've done that, and I change the pitch each swing. So the location is going to be about the same because it takes too much time to move the machine back and forth, but I might move the knob a little bit to make it run a little bit more, or turn a changeup down a little bit. Sometimes I'll keep it right where it is. We play music during BP, so they can't hear the machine going faster or slower, and they're just really trying to see the pitch out of the machine, and it's not feel good. Our numbers for executing, like we talked about BP charting, are way down. Instead of somebody getting 30 points, they're getting 17 points this season. But I think it's helping us not get stuck in taking too big of swings, and being just a little more disciplined at the plate and seeing certain pitches.
Sure. So this is probably my favorite question, because I always like to steal things that I know that I could take tomorrow that the kids are going to like. So if you showed up tomorrow and you said, hey guys, we're doing this today in practice, they just explode because they love it. So what would that thing or things be?
Yeah, we have something called Clutch Up BP, and we basically have 4 groups of 4. It can be any amount of groups, but that's just what we have this season. So we have one of the groups is live hitting, and that's 4 players. I let them pick their own teams. One group is live BP. The other group is infield in or infield back, but there's an infield group. And then we have 4 guys that are in the outfield. They could play wherever they want. And there's a point system. It's all timed. So we'll go, depending on the day, we'll probably go 8 to 10 minutes a group. We start a timer. We start throwing BP. Any ball that runs through the infield, ground ball through the infield, is worth 1 point. Any fly ball that touches any grass in fair territory is 2 points. Any ball that hits the fence, the outfield fence, on the ground or in the air, is worth 3 points. And any ball that leaves is 4. And they love it because it's competitive. The 4th group is our off group, and they're behind the turtle, and they're getting after it. They're trying to get in the hitter's head, and our hitter's job is to try to just block out all the noise and keep making good swings. So if you get a point, then you stay in. If you foul a ball off or miss, then you're out of the cage. So it gets competitive and it gets pretty cool because you get a guy that goes on a little bit of a run and he's in there for 10, 15 swings, or you hit a ground ball, and a player misses it. Instead of that being an out and next guy getting in the cage, this guy gets to go again. And so you just keep going. If you get points, you stay in. And it gets really competitive. It's fast paced. Guys are in and out of the cage very quickly because they don't want to waste time with their reps. It makes hitters hit. They're not taking pitches that are just on the outer half because they're trying to, turn and burn during BP. Mm-hmm. If they take a pitch, it's hurting their time. So they have to get out. They have to get after fastballs away and do some things like that. It's easily the thing that they like the most.
No, we actually may try that today. Just saying. So that's awesome. I like that. I really like the fourth group too. That you're behind talking trash because you got to clutch up, right?
Yep, and also outfielders. My biggest pet peeve during batting practice is outfielders that watch balls. And so this one, even if it's not hit to you, you have to take a good angle because you can cut down a point just by stopping the ball from hitting the fence. And so, that every point counts. They're usually really tight games. I pick 4 guys to be captains and say, don't forget about defense. Don't forget about infield play. Pick who you think can, field a hard hit ground ball or who can take good angles in the outfield. But yeah, it's a good deal. We try to do it usually once a week. A lot of times we do it on Mondays. Every Monday we have what we call Monday drills. And that's where we go over our PFPs, our pick plays, our trick plays, our, all kinds of organizational plays, I guess, if you will, on defense, first and third. And then we'll usually go into gauntlet, clutch up and do some things like that. So,
I've heard you're the trick play master, but I don't think that we could get you to share too many of those on the air. So I may have to do that on the side a little bit.
Side note. Yeah, for sure. I don't mind. I think it's fun for the kids. And I think it, for us, sometimes we do it. A lot of people think, they might be doing it too much. Sometimes I'll do it even when I think it's not going to work. I do it just to kind of change the pace of the game, get the pitcher's mind going in a different direction if he looks like he's struggling a little bit. But yeah, I'm all about it. I like that kind of stuff for sure.
Definitely. Well, this is the resource question, and I always like to end this one just because, again, we're all learners. We're all trying to listen to this show to get better from you. And so what are some things that have changed your coaching career? It could be people, books, videos, conferences, anything that we could go to try and learn some of the different stuff that you talked about today.
Yeah, I mean, all the clinics, and that's my biggest resource. I think is clinics, podcasts like this, the ABCA podcast. Try to, I don't have a lot of time to read. I don't read too much. I do read a little bit, but basically everything that I go to, whether it's our state convention, any kind of national clinic or whatever it is, I have a list of things on my phone that I break up into team meeting stuff, like a quote that I like. Then we'll go into all these things, team defense, individual defense, BP, pitching, all these things. And I'll put them in my phone, and I have things from 12 years ago. And when I go through and make our training plan for practice that day, I will look through every single day. I'll say, okay, what have we not done? We haven't done this. Oh yeah, I remember this about base running. I remember Coach so-and-so was talking about this. Mm-hmm. Let's try this today. And then I just put notes down next to it, whether or not it's something that we liked and I liked or didn't like. But my biggest resource, I think, is all the other coaches. And it's not just baseball coaches. It's, any sport. I'm obsessed with watching championships. I tell my players all the time, I'll go to state championship games that have, not baseball, not anything, not football, just any kind of a state championship game. I love going to see and listen to coaches and listen to what they say after the game and their press conferences or their, reporter asking them questions. I think that's invaluable information, but just learning from all the different coaches that I either played for or coached against. I think for me growing up, I think it was a disadvantage for me, but I had 3 different head high school coaches, and I had a new coach every year I was in college. And so it's rare to play through high school and college and I had 7 coaches or 6 coaches through that time. And I kind of used the things that I liked about them and molded it into kind of my own philosophy, I guess.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, Matt, man, you brought it today just like I thought that you would, and you've shared a ton of different content with us and stuff that we can all share and take and steal from you. But if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do so?
My email is probably the best way. It's mdenny@tempeunion.org.
Okay.
And that's probably the best way. You could also get in touch with our Twitter account, Zona Baseball Instruction Twitter. That would be a good one.
Okay.
Other than that, email is probably the best way. And exchange phone number. I try to call as much as I can. So I'm always up for a conversation at any hour, talk about baseball with certain guys. So.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm going to open it up for you to just talk to us a little bit and open up the mic for you to say anything that you want. But is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners before you go?
No, I appreciate being on. Like I said before, I'm humbled and honored to be on. I think as far as advice for other people, be a part of your association. I think it's a big deal to be a part of a group of coaches and network with coaches. I know there's a lot of states that have low, participation with their association. Try to get to the clinics. I think obviously our national conventions are through the roof and numbers are getting better and better. So just continue to keep doing that within your association and don't hesitate to reach out. I think sometimes coaches are afraid to ask other coaches, and you'd be surprised with how much information you can get from coaches, even coaches that we coach against. We had Josh Garcia from Brophy on the show, and I've listened to that podcast, and we've had different conversations about certain stuff. And I think it's just really important to network and get information from different people.
Thank you for listening to Ahead of the Curve. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, which could include Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it on social media to help get the word out. Once again, thank you for joining us.